Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And Shane, let me tell you, Saturday's game against North Dakota State. I know it was North Dakota State, but as we talked about last week, intelligent fans understand what that meant. It felt like a giant being lifted off of my shoulders as a fan. And I know that's a very strange reaction, but did you feel similarly watching that game? Like, finally, Arizona is getting over the hump.
2 wins in one season. We are a spoiled group, Eric Cohen. 2 wins. When's the last time that's happened in the same season? But yeah, I think so. I think, winning a meaningful game, FCS opponent or not, I know we've talked about that ad nauseum. North Dakota State's a legitimately good team. And Jed Fish talked after the game that they were a tough team to defend, not only because they're a talented, experienced group, but because this is the only kind of team like that Arizona's going to play all year.
Yeah,
they run the ball and they basically focus on the run as much as they do, kind of like some of their teams run the triple option. So it was a challenge in that way. But yeah, no, it was great to see them not only win a game but come through in the clutch. The comeback. I thought, and I tweeted at you toward the end of the game. I thought they're going to lose by about the same margin I predicted, which was about 10 points. I thought it was going to be like 35-24 North Dakota State. They were going to run out the clock, and then their defense. Challenging to watch their defense, Arizona's defense through the night, but they made some big stops and big plays. And I got to tell you, it's refreshing. And we'll talk more about every aspect of this game a little bit, but it was refreshing to see a team. It's refreshing to see a team that can score in the red zone.
Yeah.
After so many problems with that for the last few years, Arizona's like 10 for 11 in the red zone. And the one time they didn't score, I think was like a fourth down situation where they had to go for it. So they and a couple of them have been field goals, but mostly touchdowns, and that problem is gone. So a long way to go. I'm interested to hear your perspective on the fans there, because it looked like there was a lot of yellow in the stands. Dorian Singer said after the game he thought it was about 50-50, but what was your perspective?
No, it wasn't 50-50. The west side of the stadium was filled with North Dakota State fans, which is where my seats usually are. I decided I was given some tickets in the end zone, and then I took liberty to, in the second half, move up higher in the end zone, so you get a better view of the entire field.
Sure.
So that's where I was sitting, the end zone where they scored the winning touchdown towards the end of the game, the north end zone. For me, it was about 25% North Dakota State fans, maybe 30%, but they were very loud.
Yeah.
I would say
you don't see that much yellow in the stands when ASU comes to town.
I cannot remember offhand, Shane, more fans from an opposing team in attendance at a game. And they're very nice people. The people that I spoke to on campus and at the game, very, very nice people. I didn't have an issue with one of them. They were very nice. Just, they were loud. I mean, We're not used to that. We're not used to our fans being loud unless it's a, late game situation. And by the way, I thought they were great at the end of the game. I thought Arizona's fans on fourth down, when our buddy Jeff Dean was asking him, he did fourth down. I thought they were great. This was a very fun game to attend. With that said, there wasn't at one point in the game, not any point in the game until the end, that I think Arizona was going to win.
Even because we were texting at halftime. It's like, they're ahead, but the way this game's going, the way that North Dakota State's been able to push Arizona around on the line of scrimmage, it didn't feel like it was going to be a win.
No, and I think I'm going to probably get some crap for saying that, just like I said about Jaden Delora last week.
I bet most fans feel the same way. They're being nice.
I just, there wasn't, when they scored the touchdown with Cowing, which is a great play, and they got the lead, I'm like, well, here comes North Dakota State. They're going to go down and score. I don't know what their coach was doing punting. I don't know. Matt Entz coached a terrible game. I don't know what he was thinking by punting on fourth. That was brutal. I mean, even I in the stands could figure out this isn't a very smart move.
Well, and before that, the possession before where they could have kicked a field goal, and Jed Fish said he thought they were going to kick a field goal to go up 7. I actually didn't. I thought they were going to go for it, which they did. And there wasn't anything elaborate about that fourth down call, Eric. It was a quarterback run. And basically at that point of the game, it was like 4th and 2, North Dakota State. They're thinking, look, we've been pushing these guys around all game. There's no reason we can't just go and grind out 2 yards, even if they know what's coming. And Jerry Roberts, who's been the defensive MVP to this
Fantastic.
Point, stood up Cam Miller, got just a yard, and they went down, and they still had to go down and score. And that's one thing that Arizona's offense did this time. They didn't the previous week, was every time Arizona's defense got a stop, they got the strip sack by Hunter Echols deep in Arizona territory, and both the fourth down stops. Every time they got the ball after that, they scored a touchdown. And that was the difference between this past weekend's game and the one before that.
Well, this was a game, Shane, that I think going back to an Arizona lore, like when is the last time that Arizona would have won a game like this?
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, it's years. Maybe that 2014 team is like the last time that I was like, all right, this team is going to fight till the end of the game, like that 2014 team did.
Usually that kind of thing is reserved for men's basketball. You know, they're behind by a few points late in the game. You think, we got this. We're at home. We got our home fans. We're going to find a way to win. Usually I talked about it. It's like the opposite at Arizona Stadium. Like, how are we going to find a way to blow this? So it was refreshing in a game where we both thought, let's be honest, they were probably going to lose, especially when they fell behind the fourth quarter. They were able to pull it out. And this team showed a lot of maturity. And we're going to get into a lot more of this here soon. But, you know, Jaden DeLora, light years better than he was the previous week. This team is learning from its mistakes quickly. And I think that's a positive sign. And one quick thing I'll mention as far as opposing fans in the stadium, I remember Iowa in 2010, almost the entire upper section I thought was gold. So Arizona's kind of Big Ten country like that. A lot of people from the Midwest, maybe including North Dakota, live down here. So there were a lot of Iowa fans there, but there were also a bunch of Arizona fans because it was a sold out game. So it had a slightly different feel.
This was a game, Shane, it felt so good to win. And once again, I still hate the scheduling. I know the result.
I know.
I still hate it. It was
enjoy it. It
was such a thrill. Yeah. I mean, you talk about that drive home. I got home at 1:15.
Always feels better. It's so much easier that drive. That drive sucks either way. But when you're coming home after a win, you listen to the post-game show on the radio, you maybe you safely look at some tweets on the way home and
no, you know what? I didn't need caffeine for the ride home. I was wired. I was excited. I could have driven. I joked with the person I went with. I was like, I can drive back to Tucson now. Not really, but it was a fun night. All right, let's preview the show before we get into buy or sell. Our buddy John Canzano going to join us. I know he is a popular topic.
Everyone loves John Canzano. Everyone.
I wouldn't use the term everyone, but especially those when it comes to Pac-10, Pac-12 realignment. And all of that, John has been as plugged in as anyone, and he hasn't been wrong yet. As much as I thought he would be, he wasn't. So we're excited to have John. He's a good guy, and I hope you guys will enjoy listening to that. Also, now it's time, Shane, for our traditional buy or sell, which is presented by Ice Shaker, and you can get one of those beautiful ice shakers that Shane is holding up at iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, to get $5 off. And these things are amazing. I don't have mine in sight today, but I will be drinking out of it, I promise you, as soon as this show ends.
I will mention real quick, they really do keep drinks cold. You know, we both had some ice in there for hours before we record our episode, and the ice is still in there. It's a nice cold drink. I haven't tested out the hot function yet because I really haven't had to out in Arizona. But this winter I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not a hot drinker, but I guess you'll let us know. All right. Number one, Shane, buy or sell. North Dakota State lost this game more so than Arizona won it.
I'm going to sell that they were outplayed. I think that, you know, if Arizona and North Dakota State played 10 times, North Dakota State would probably win 6 or 7 of them, you know.
Okay.
For most of the game, I think they were better to the line of scrimmage. They pretty much did whatever they wanted. Off on the offensive side of the ball. I thought they were a very disciplined team. And I thought that they were the better team for most of the game, but Arizona made the majority of the big plays. They didn't turn the ball over, and they had the strip sack, Hunter Eccles, that turned into a touchdown, and those 4th down stops. I think that, to your point, North Dakota State they got a little lax with their play calling. I think a little too, shall we say, Noel Mazzoni there in the 4th quarter.
Fair.
But they expected to keep pushing Arizona around the way they had the whole game, and they didn't. And why wouldn't they think that? And their defense responded where they needed it most. So, you know, and I'll mention this on that last possession where Arizona took the lead. So many clutch plays. You know, it would really, you know, the cliche was a team effort. Jaden DeLora looked sharp. The touchdown pass to Cowing on the run.
Yep.
Mac made a great clutch 3rd down catch. He made 2 big plays, even though he wasn't big on the stat sheet. He drew the pass interference penalty before halftime to get the field goal, and then the 3rd down. Jonah Coleman had some big runs.
Yeah, we'll talk about him. Yeah, coming up.
Yeah. So I think they earned the win. I understand your perspective, but I think Arizona earned the win by they didn't win like if you're scoring like a boxing match, but they made the biggest plays of the night.
You know what? You sold me on this. I'm going to sell this one. North Dakota State did not lose this game more so than Arizona won it, but it's close. Arizona deserved to win the game based on how they played down the stretch.
Yep.
With that said, I don't think Matt Entz coached a great game. I thought North Dakota State could have gone down the field at will in the second half, and they just didn't. I don't know what was with their play calling. Maybe Arizona made some adjustments. And Johnny Nansen, I know that we'll talk about that. Get Canzano's thoughts about Johnny Nansen, what he thinks about the job that Arizona's defense has done thus far. But this is a game Arizona probably should have lost, I'll take it. I'm going to say that they won it just slightly more than North Dakota State lost it.
Well, the only last thing I'll say about it is this: I don't want to play North Dakota State again. We're done. We got the win. We got out of Dodge. All good.
I would not be upset if they never played again. If that was the only time in my life, I've gone to 180 college football games now. My first against North Dakota State. Would not be depressed if that was my last. Hoping I live a long life at this point. Number 2, Shane. This is Arizona's most significant win since at least 2018 by yourself.
Well, obviously it's a low bar because there weren't that many wins to speak of. But yeah, sure. I think so. Doing it in front of the home crowd, I think, mattered. And I know that it was special to you for that reason. You were in San Diego. You got to go to that game, which was
fun. Yeah,
which was awesome. But you haven't been to a home win in 3 years. You missed the Cal game last year because you got the COVID. So I'm thrilled for you and for the home fans that have been loyal like you have, that they finally got the win. So it generated excitement into the program, the fans that stayed up late to watch on TV like I did. And it validated the decision of the fans who made the decision to come to that game. Even maybe some who were on the fence, they didn't play well against Mississippi State. It's the same old Wildcats. Who really is North Dakota State anyway? To your point, I'm sure a lot of fans were thinking that. So in that regard, it was a win against a quality opponent, FCS or not. It was a clutch win. It was exciting. And I think also all the visiting fans there, from based on what you told me, all the visiting fans are kind of galvanized the home fans to make more noise too. And I'm sure it made for an exciting atmosphere. So I think from an emotional standpoint, it was probably their biggest win. Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to say this is probably Arizona's biggest win as a program since October 27, 2018 against Justin Herbert and number 19 Oregon, where Arizona won 44-15.
Sure.
Ironically, that game as well, I remember I also sat in the north end zone. So maybe that's a key. And that is why next year I want to move my tickets over there, because I'm starting to buy into this whole superstition thing. And seriously, it's more comfortable seats with seat backs.
I was going to say they actually have the seat backs there, right?
Yeah, it's way better. I'm just going to tell you that. Yeah, I mean, I know some people don't like end zone views. At first, I was sitting lower in the end zone. I prefer to sit a little bit higher, but yes, it is a significant difference.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite end zone views, Eric, was the 2009 Territorial Cup game.
Interesting.
When Alex Zendejas, I know, blocked PATs the following year, but that year kicked the game-winning field goal. If you go back and watch the end of that game, you can see me with my arms raised.
Really?
My ASU friend has got his arms folded right next to me. It was one of my favorite memories. It was in Sun Devil Stadium, no less. But end zone seats aren't all bad.
Well, I was sitting in the upper deck that day, so you had a lot better seats than I did.
There you go.
All right. So, yes, I'm going to say definitely this is the most significant win for Arizona since at least 2018. Number 3, the most impressive offensive player for the Wildcats, Shane, was running back Jonah Coleman. Buy or sell?
I'd give it to Delora, so I'll sell that. Jaden Delora, we talked about last week. Does he have the maturity and the humility to learn from his mistakes? And he did. He ran the ball when he needed to, not too much. He threw the ball when he needed to. Jed Fish said after the game that Delora has the permission to sort of throw the ball on the run if he sees a guy open. So that communication between Jed Fish and Jaden Delora seems to be very strong. So I'd give it to him. As far as Jonah Coleman, I put him right behind Delora for sure. We saw the week before when he chased down the Mississippi State defender on an interception. He hustles. He plays smarter than a true freshman. He's definitely up there. He's made some big plays, scored some touchdowns. But I'd give Delora the MVP, at least for the last game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to sell the Jonah Coleman one. I had to throw in a sell here sooner or later. I was really impressed with him. I know he only touched the ball 7 times, 46 combined yards and a touchdown, but the guy runs hard. He plays with a ton of effort. This is a keeper. This guy in the backfield, Speedy Luke was more of the highly touted name considering what he did in All-American Bowl, but
and he'll be big going forward. But
right,
yeah.
But that 1-2 punch with Coleman and Speedy Luke for future years, and that's nothing against Michael Wiley, who, by the way, has gotten a lot better this season. That 1-2 punch is really exciting. With that said, I feel bad for a guy like Stevie Rocker, who was getting a chance last year. Who probably never going to see the field again at Arizona.
Drake Anderson, he was their leading rusher last year. We had him on the podcast last year.
Never going to see never going to see the field. Yeah, it's too bad. But these guys, these freshmen, I mean, Jed's done a great job. Just got to keep them. In this day and age of the transfer portal, you got to keep guys happy. So
that's true. And you know what? That's the next test for them, I think, really, is they've done a great job getting guys here, both freshmen and transfers. The next test is, can they keep them? Can they keep them happy? Especially some of the guys who may not get as much playing time as they want right away.
Yeah. And I think that, we'll worry about that in the offseason. I'm sure talk plenty about that, but Jaden DeLore, the most impressive player, the throw on the run and the 10 rushes for 50 yards, significant improvement over last week since Jed allowed him to actually run with the ball. Number 4, Shane, the odds makers have it right. Arizona deserves to be an underdog at Cal.
3.5 points last we saw. Is that right?
It was 3, down to 3.
3 down to 3 now. Yeah. Okay.
Started at 6.
Yeah, it did. It went down to 3 quickly. So, but you know what? I guess I'm naive here because I actually expected Arizona to be a slight favorite in this game.
I did too.
And I don't think Cal -3 is unreasonable by any means, but I actually think Arizona is a better team than them. And someone on Twitter noted earlier this week, odds makers don't seem to know what to do with Arizona. They were the same odds makers. They had them winning 2.5 games, or put the over under 2.5 before the season started. I think that's a fair point. They have so much new talent. They won just 1 game a year ago. It's still hard to know how good they are. And then you have to factor in Cal. They played Notre Dame tough. And by the way, almost a backdoor cover there. And then they almost tied the game too. It was a crazy last couple of minutes. They played Notre Dame tough, but then Notre Dame lost to Marshall, which just lost to Bowling Green. So it's still, and then Cal barely beat UNLV. So it's still early in the season, and we're still separating the bad teams from the good teams, from the great teams, and Cal is at home. So from that perspective, I think it's fine for Cal to be a slight favorite. So I guess I'll buy it if they have it right. But I was actually personally surprised that Arizona is not favored, even though I probably shouldn't have been.
So generally in football, the rule is home team gets 3 points. Yeah. So on a neutral field, what they're saying is Arizona and Cal are equal. I think Arizona is better on a neutral field. I think if they played Cal tomorrow at some random bowl game in the middle of the country, I think Arizona wins.
And how big of home field advantage is Berkeley anyway, though?
I can't imagine it's going to be a sellout. One thing you said, Shane, that's really interesting. So, I work for a site, sportsline.com, which is a pick site. And I don't want to give away the Arizona Cal pick, but there's a model that makes these score predictions. The pick on that game, in my opinion, is shocking because it does not account for Arizona's growth this season. Let me say that.
Yeah.
I just don't think the models know what to do with Arizona. That's one thing that a model can't necessarily figure out. Thus, 3 games into the year, Jaden DeLore is the quarterback. That they have, T-Mac and Jacob Cowing and this running back parade, of good players. That's where the model just isn't right. And obviously, what it says, but it's not favorable to Arizona.
Yeah, well, I don't think that kind of thing is considered a statistic any more than I would say win probability is a statistic. Yeah. Statistics are things that have already happened. Trying to guess the future is a whole other thing. And it's just that. It's a guess. With that said, I think ESPN also has Cal as like their FPI or whatever has Cal as like a 65% chance. Means nothing. Means absolutely nothing. And look, maybe they'll be right, but it means nothing at this point. But I do sympathize a bit with odds makers and the people who create these algorithms because it really is tough to know what to make of Arizona right now. All
right. Now, one thing about the odds makers, remember this, Shane, the whole goal for an odds maker is to get equal amount of money on both sides. If they do that, they generally will make 10% juice. So they make a 10% profit, win or lose, whichever team wins or loses. So the goal is that the numbers are going to show that Cal is, these models show that Cal is the better team based on last year, despite that result in November where 25 guys were out and Arizona won the game. Cal was the better overall team. I just don't feel it that way. And I think what they're trying to do is if they had made Arizona a favorite, the 75% of the money would have been on Cal and they would have had a major liability there.
Sure.
Now you have the sharp people, and I'm wondering if some sharp people have gotten in on Arizona to push that line down. We'll make our picks later in the show.
You think that line's going to shrink even more before the game time?
No, I think it goes more towards Cal. I think
you think so?
If I were to make a prediction, I'd say it ends up at 3.5 at the end of the week.
Okay.
I think you get more people, casual bettors who will boost that up, maybe 3.5, 4 points. We'll see if I'm right or wrong. Bonus question, Shane, we couldn't go through buy or sell presented by Ice Shaker without bringing this one up. Herm Edwards has been deposed as the head coach of Arizona State. He was not fired. It was a very bizarre sight. As I pointed out at 2 a.m. on Saturday evening on Twitter, this was the first time since 2018 that Arizona had won on a night and ASU
lost. Yeah,
to Eastern Michigan. I mean, the night was amazing. That's part of the reason my drive home was so great. Shane, are you buy or sell? You were surprised at the timing of this Herm Edwards firing, just in general.
I'll buy that I was at first. And I even tweeted about it. It's like, why now? Why not do it in the off season when most fans were calling for it anyway, especially with the off field stuff and assistant coaches leaving in mass exodus. The more I think about it, the more it seems like, and I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but maybe ASU didn't want to fire Herm for that reason because they don't want to look like it was some sort of admission of guilt. And now that loss to Eastern Michigan sort of gives them the cover to do it, because the fans that were calling for Herm to be fired before then probably were now or at that point, right? Yeah. So from that perspective, I guess it sort of makes sense. Now they have a whole year to do a search for a new coach, but they could have done it all last year. I think they're probably better off doing that. But the more I think about it, the more I get ASU doing it when they did.
I'm bummed. And I tweeted this out. I really wanted Herm's last game to be an Arizona win. That would have been fantastic. He went 4-0 against the Wildcats.
Yeah, isn't that crazy though, that ASU, and I tweeted about this too. ASU's won 5 in a row against Arizona. Herm won 4 of them. Arizona is the one of the 2 programs that lost 23 out of 24 games. And yet Arizona fans right now are feeling great. They're excited about the future. And ASU fans they might be happy Herm left, but they're thinking, what's next? This could be a rough road for a while. So you just never know in college football.
All right. Bonus question number 2, Shane. This one you do not know. I kind of threw this one. Arizona State's loss to Eastern Michigan is comparable to Arizona's loss to NAU in terms of the detriment it had on the fan base. Buy or sell?
Ooh, yeah. That caveat you threw in there, because I was all ready to sell it because the NAU loss is worse in terms.
Well, agreed. But compared for what the expectations of the fan base were.
Yeah. Oh, although, you know what? I'm still going to sell it because I think Arizona fans still expected, and we still expected. We go back and listen to last year's podcast at this time. We still expected Arizona to beat NAU. Sure. And then they go up 13-0, and you think, okay, well, at least there's a win. At least our losing streak is over. And then it doesn't happen. So maybe it's comparable. I think ASU football fans they expect more from their football team. It is a football school. Arizona is a men's basketball school. So from that perspective, I understand what you're saying. It's just hard for me to put it on the same level, even though I understand where you're coming from.
It's on the same level for me. Listen, NAU is worse. Don't get me wrong. It was an FCS team. But for what Arizona State expects of their football program with Herm Edwards, to lose at home by nearly double digits, 30-21, to a team they were a 20-point favorite over, Eastern Michigan, the first time a MAC team has ever beaten a Pac-12 team. Mm-hmm. This to them was their NAU moment.
Sure. They were 20.5 point favorites, I believe.
Eastern Michigan. Were. Yep. I'm very interested to hear what we're going to bring it up to Canzano coming up next to hear what he thinks about that. But I reveled in it, and I'm sure plenty of you listening to this podcast reveled in it as well. Coming up next, John Canzano. He knows everything, most things about realignment. Let's find out what's going on. Plus, his thoughts on Arizona here on Wildcat Country. Scooby, we sent you an ice shaker. They are a sponsor, courtesy of our buddy Chris Gronkowski. You have it right there.
I love my ice shaker. Fun fact: when I trained with Glenn Gronkowski, everybody, when we were trained together, people thought I was the other Gronk brother. So it's kind of funny. But yes, I love my ice shaker. It is very good. I use it every day. I am a veteran to the ice shaker game, by the way.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
Very pleased to have our buddy John Canzano, who is pretty much the guru when it comes to everything and anything Pac-12. You can listen to him up in Oregon and find more of his columns at johncanzano.com. John, glad to have you on for the second time. And I guess it's really, for us here in Arizona, things are going great. We're 2-1 in the non-conference season. Just your thoughts on Arizona thus far from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, it was really interesting. At Pac-12 Media Day, I had a really good conversation with Jedd Fisch, and you can tell when you talk to coaches who feel like they know something nobody else knows. He had that feel about him, and maybe it's Jayden de Laura at quarterback. Maybe he just knows, hey, look, they've got 20-something transfer players. He probably looked around the room and knew he had more talent than he had a year ago, but you could tell that Arizona felt like much better now in this season under Jedd Fisch, and they're showing it on the field. I mean, they're winning games. They've been competitive. They were non-competitive in some games last season. So I'm excited to see what happens in conference play, because I don't think the rest of the country has woken up to the fact that Arizona's playing good football.
Yeah, John, thanks again for joining us. Like Eric said, Eric and I have had this discussion many times about whether it was worth scheduling North Dakota State, and like it was like a no-win situation, even though they got a big win. What are your thoughts on scheduling a team like that? Just the benefits, pros and cons.
Well, look, I mean, I think it's harder and harder to get those games. I've been talking to ADs around the conference, and, there's some talk about the Pac-12 going from 9 conference games down to 8. If they do that, they've got to have a crossover partner, like another conference, like the ACC, to say, hey, we're just going to play crossover games. So because there's a real challenge right now in trying to get those money games. There are fewer teams that are willing to come for under $700,000. Like, I know Portland State asked Alabama for $1.5 million in the last conversation. And so I think you're having some of those easier wins are tougher to get or more expensive to get to come to your stadium. And then the teams that are willing to come and play it, like North Dakota State, they're dangerous. I mean, even Oregon State playing Montana State, that's a good team from the Big Sky. It's a little bit dicey, even though they got a big W in that. That's a little dicey to get that game. So I think you have to sort of address the idea that it's tough to get those games. You can pay those better competitors like North Dakota State a little less money. So you generally want the win, right? They got the win. They paid for it. They sold some tickets. I think Arizona has to leave that feeling pretty good, because I think, North Dakota State was something like 6-0 against their previous 6,
FBS teams.
Yeah. That was a dicey game for Arizona, and they got out of there with a W.
Yeah. So heading into Pac-12 play, John, I have Arizona ranked in the Pac-12. It's kind of hard to know where everyone is, but I have them somewhere in like the 7 to 9 range as far as how good they are compared to the rest of the Pac-12. Where do you put them?
Yeah, I think you're about right there. I would put them closer to 7 than 9, though, because I think, offensively, they've done some things that make me think that they can score in the Pac-12. And I'm looking around, and I do think there's a core group of about 6 teams right now that are set apart from the bottom 6. I think, the Pacific Northwest has the 4 teams. And of course, you've got USC and Utah. After them, I think it's kind of wide open. I think UCLA, Arizona, maybe Cal, maybe Stanford, don't quite know who they are yet, are in that conversation. And then, of course, we have Colorado at the bottom that, everybody's kind of wondering where they are. But I think there's some opportunities in this conference. We've always seen the Pac-12, cannibalize itself. But Arizona is one of those teams that I think could rise up and beat teams in the top 6, and just needs to hold serve in the games it should win.
Yeah, and that's key, John, because Arizona has Cal and Colorado up in their next 2, and then they have a really rough stretch starting with Oregon, includes Washington, UCLA, USC, Utah. I mean, that's a game where they have to at least get one if we're going to talk bowl game here, but that's beside the point. As far as coaches being fired in the conference, Herm Edwards, first of all, was that a surprise to you? And secondly, do you see Carl Durrell being out soon? And is Chip Kelly is his seat getting warmer?
Yeah, I thought at the beginning of the year that Herm was the one guy that was in trouble. So it didn't shock me, but Arizona State stood by him through the NCAA investigation, through all the turmoil of the last 18 months. And so it was a little alarming to see them, go kind of knee-jerk reaction after a loss to Eastern Michigan. So I think the timing of it was what was a little funky, but it may be that Michael Crow and Ray Anderson decided like, hey, this is the best time. The fan base was sort of restless and galvanized against Herm, and maybe it was the best time to get out of that scenario. And I think the people in Arizona State really expected that Herm might resign at the end of the year and just kind of, he's 68 years old. Maybe he goes off and does something else, gets back into broadcasting. But to see him go out the way he did, I think the Herm Edwards fans didn't like it. Arizona State wasn't great for them to start the season and now have this big interruption. So I think, really disruptive. And I tend to think, like, you see some teams rally in the wake of a coaching dismissal. I don't think this is going to be the case at Arizona State. I think they're going to fizzle a little bit here and struggle.
You think Darrell, I heard a rumor that after this week, he's gone. And Chip, after barely beating South Alabama last week, he's not looking so good either. What are your thoughts on those two?
Comes down to money for both of those guys. Carl Darrell, he is, if they fire him at the end of this season, after January 1, I think they'll only owe him about $7 million only. If they wait another year, it drops to $4 million. So the question is, what are the Colorado boosters willing to pay to part ways? It's clearly the energy's gone from the program. Rick George knows it. You don't put the statement that he put out without knowing that you have a problem and it's just a matter of time. I had another coach tell me that they thought, not a Pac-12 coach, outside the conference, said that they felt like Colorado was asleep. I think that's a good estimation of what's going on with that football program. It's taken a nap right now. It's offensively anemic. I think he inherited a tough situation, but he just hasn't done enough with it. So I don't think he makes it beyond this season. It's just a matter of, do they fire him before the buyout drops? Do they wait till the end of the year, wait till after January 1, or does it happen sooner? When it comes to Chip, he just got a contract extension. And I felt like there was some chance there that UCLA may not have wanted to extend him. He certainly didn't have the great success on the field, but he had some influential boosters. He had the Wasserman family and he had Troy Aikman in his corner. And I think Martin Jarmon, the athletic director at UCLA, really didn't have a choice. They were obviously, now we know, they were focused on other things as well, trying to get to the Big Ten conference. So they owe Chip Kelly too much money to part ways with him during this season or even next. So I do think that he's going to get some time at UCLA.
John, going back to Arizona, their conference opener against Cal this week in Berkeley. It's hard to kind of make sense of Cal from my perspective at this point. They almost beat Notre Dame, but the Notre Dame lost to Marshall, which lost to Bowling Green, and then Cal just barely got past UNLV a couple of weeks ago. What do you make of the Cal Bears so far?
I picked them to beat Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's really down, really struggling. I thought Justin Wilcox in that game would give Notre Dame's offense fits, and it looked good for a while. But look, that Cal team, I think, is a perfect patsy for this point of the season for Arizona. Like, this is an ideal game. If you want to get a win, get tested a little bit, I think Cal presents itself in that way. I think offensively, it'll be interesting to see Jed Fish against Justin Wilcox and that defense at Cal. But I just think Arizona's more talented. And I think, it comes down to the players, and, barring 3 turnovers or something wild that happens in this game, I expect Arizona to beat Cal. And I think it'll be a good test for them. It'll be a good opportunity for them to kind of get some momentum in conference play.
What are your thoughts on Johnny Nansen so far as a defensive coordinator? We know he was a great recruiter, first time as a DC at the college level. What are your thoughts on what he's done for on the defensive side so far, replacing Don Brown?
I think that you've got a number of coordinators in the conference right now that are in the same boat. I'm watching Oregon in the same way. Kenny Dillingham on offense and, Tosh Lapoy on defense. And I'm looking at Trent Bray at Oregon State, who's really calling plays for the first full season on defense. And I think the sample size is too small. It's hard to tell. I look at North Dakota State and I think, is that a better win than, Oregon State beating Boise State? Like, I think, you could look at those two things and compare them. So I think the sample size is too small. Pay attention to what happens in this week, because I think you're now going to get to see some of those crossover games where we get to see Pac-12 on Pac-12 crime. And we get to see, can the Arizona defense take care of a Cal offense that really doesn't feel very dynamic? And, if they do, then okay, look out, because I think Arizona will score points this season.
All right, John, it's been 10 minutes and we haven't brought up our favorite subject with you, and that's conference realignment. So now it's time. The latest rumor is Amazon wants to get involved with conferences to televise games. My first question on this topic is, the Pac-12, in your opinion, are we fully good to go going forward, or is Oregon and Washington still planning their exit strategy in the next couple of years?
I think the whole Oregon-Washington thing was overblown. I think that there were obviously conversations between consultants I think the Big Ten was never really serious about immediately or imminently taking a team. I think they were just having conversations, and I don't blame the sides for doing that, but it did cause some unrest and a lot of anxiety in the footprint, and people to go, oh, is the conference imploding? Or, George Kliavkoff, we talked to him this week. He sounded super confident that the 10 remaining teams were going to stay in the conference. He didn't seem concerned about the Big 12 or the Big 10. I've talked to numerous athletic directors in the conference in the last couple months. It matches what they're saying. So I think that this group of 10 feels galvanized. Now, if Oregon leaves, let's just say Oregon decides they have to get out and they go to the Big 10 at some point, then it's a different conversation. And you might have some programs that run for the hills. But right now, I think they're on the same page. I think they'll get a media rights deal done. And the question is, what's the blend, right? Is it a streamer? Is it Amazon, Apple? Is it ESPN? Is it a combination of both? Because if you go all in with a streamer, you may get more money, but I think we're all going to recognize that, hey, some of the distribution issues that we have all been frustrated with the Pac-12 networks would just perpetuate with a total streaming service. I mean, I can imagine my parents calling me saying, how do I get Amazon, or how do I do this, or how do I change channels? Like, we're all going through that. But I think the timeline for streaming, everybody keeps saying 5 to 10 years. Nonsense. I think it's happening sooner. Like, I think 24 months, 18 months, we're going to see more than just the NFL, more than just MLS. I think they're going into college football. And so if you're the Pac-12, I think you have to get on board with some of that. And my hunch is it's going to be the Pac-12 networks that end up on Amazon or Apple, and it'll still be called the Pac-12 network. It'll be on Amazon or Apple. We'll all be able to get it and pay for it if we want it. George Kliavkoff said that when we were talking to him. He said, he made this comment about, might have to subscribe to get the content, but we want it available. And then he talked about kickoff times and the windows. And I got to thinking, like, the 7:30 games that we all hate, 7:00 games. If you're on Amazon or you're on Apple, you can play those games anytime. You don't have to play them at 7:00. There's no set window. So you could, if you're Arizona or Washington State or whatever, you could move that game to say it's going to be a 4:00 kickoff. Everyone's agreed to it. I think fans would love it. I think it would be good for the conference, but you still need ESPN or Fox, probably ESPN, as your primary partner, because you need the propaganda machine of ESPN. We all know it.
So you bet. So do you think Fox is out of the picture? I mean, how much, like, if the Pac-12 or Pac-10 goes with one of these big channels, what percentage would you put ESPN at, and what percentage would you put Fox at?
I think so. There's 36 games on the Pac-12 network. So, that just takes a chunk of your inventory over to, let's say, Amazon or Apple as a streaming thing, plus the Olympic sports and all that content that, maybe not everybody cares about, but some people do. And I think some people would subscribe to Amazon or buy Prime or buy the Apple service just to see volleyball or baseball or softball. So I think there's a market for that. But it's mainly the football games that would be the big draw. I think the rest of the content is likely to end up with ESPN. George Kliavkoff said just because somebody bought the Big 10 doesn't mean that they wouldn't buy the Pac-12. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know if he was trying to create leverage, because we all know that they're probably negotiating with ESPN, or if he really was sort of hinting that, Fox or CBS or NBC could come in and be kind of a third partner in the mix. And I think ideally, if you're the Pac-12, you want ESPN, you want a streaming service and the money there, but it would be great to have, is there one game a week that Fox gets to take, or CBS that's somewhere else? I mean, I think that gives you maximum distribution and allows you to reach some people that maybe are not streamers.
Last question for you, John. Arizona's 2-1, 9 games left. They got a couple of winnable games coming up. ASU at the end of the year, maybe in between, like Eric said, kind of a murderer's row of Pac-12 opponents. What's the ceiling for Arizona this year in terms of wins, in your opinion?
I think you got to set it where you guys kind of alluded to 6 wins in a bowl game. I mean, I think you get Cal, you get Colorado, you get Arizona State. So you're sitting at 5. Can you get one more? And I think Arizona will. I think they'll find a way to win one more game. And it really will depend on Jaden Delora staying healthy. It'll depend on, can Arizona get better while maybe some of the other teams stand still? But the top 6 teams that I mentioned, USC looks like a world beater, but we haven't seen them tested yet. Washington looks terrific. but they don't really have a bell cow running back. So they're not perfect. Oregon has some flaws. Like, I think Oregon's a good team, but they're not perfect. This is not a dominant Oregon team. Oregon State has some issues too. I think, they haven't run the ball like they had in the past. So I think, really outside of Utah and maybe USC, there are some winnable games in there for Arizona that, can they sneak one? And that's the question for Jedd Fisch. If they can get one more, they're playing in a bowl game.
If they get to a bowl game, John, we're popping champagne after what we've seen. I mean, last Saturday was the first home game I had seen a win in 3 years because I wasn't at the Cal game last year. I mean, and I'm a season ticket holder. It was a glorious feeling to actually see a win. My final question for you. So you now have a new podcast with Jon Wilner. Tell us about that. And for our audience, once again, where can they find your columns and hear you?
Yeah, if you want to read me, johncanzano.com, exclusively there. I've gone rogue. Get a free subscription, get a paid subscription, whatever works for you works for me. Wilner and I have been talking over the years, and he's come on my radio show frequently. We've talked over the years, like, why are we not doing a more in-depth podcast? And we talked about it, months before the Pac-12 lost USC and UCLA, but we kind of just called that day and went, hey man, we should be doing this. Like, it's more than a 10-minute radio interview. We could do this twice a week. And, we got George Kleofkoff this week as a guest, and we have some big plans for other guests down the pipeline. But you can find the Canzano and Wilner podcast anywhere that you get a podcast. And you can find my radio show podcast as well. If you're searching for me on any of those platforms, my radio show podcast will pop up as well. But everything's at johncanzano.com. That's really the hub.
Well, John, for the second time, we really appreciate you coming on with Shane and I, and look forward to having you on again soon. Just great intel. It's like we went to class, as I like to say. We learned so much from you in these last 15 minutes, so thanks again.
Appreciate you guys.
Really good to have John on. Great feedback from him. Just really impressed with Arizona. He's picking Arizona over Cal. Shane, what was interesting to me, a couple of things. First of all, he thinks that ASU is going to just basically shut down for the rest of the year and not play hard after Herm's firing. I would actually disagree. I think Sean Aguano is a pretty good coach out of Chandler High. I think they're going to play harder than they would have with Herm. So that's where I disagree with them, number one. Number two, just the whole realignment thing. We did not get into expansion this time around with John, but he seems pretty resolute that this conference is staying together. And I guess that's a good sign for those of you who want it. I'm still not there, but okay.
Yeah, I think sooner, well, maybe not sooner, but later, I think the Pac-12 is probably, and the Pac-10 is going to go away. Maybe not as quickly as we think, though. I think there may be some fight left in this conference for a while longer. Mm-hmm. As far as Herm Edwards and ASU, I don't agree with that either. I agree with John Canzano on a lot of things.
Yeah,
I actually think that they're going to show a little more fight now. I think that sometimes this kind of thing galvanizes a team. Not always. It depends on the situation. But, I always think back to 2011 and when Mike Stoops got fired and Tim Kish comes on and then they go off and blow out UCLA the next game. And then it was a rough season for a while after that, but then they upset ASU. So I think they'll be fine. I don't think they're going to be any worse, put it that way. They'll probably, win a couple games along the way. I did also think, when Canzano described Colorado as kind of a team that's asleep. Yeah. Made me think of Kevin Sumlin's team 2 years ago. I don't think it was last year because they were just bad. They weren't asleep. They were just bad. 2 years ago, I think Arizona was sort of sleepwalking, and I think Kevin Sumlin had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I expect them to play harder with Canzano or with Aguano, though. I think he's going to do a good job. Remember, he's coaching for his future too. He made the move to leave a successful high school program to go to the college ranks. Now he gets to take over a big program. He wants that job. I don't think he's going to get it, but
opportunity of a lifetime for him, though, for sure.
Exactly. All right. Just a couple quick things, Shane, before we get into our college picks, which we'll go through quickly. Arizona's men's basketball schedule, and it's been announced in the last week. The non-conference schedule outside of Indiana and Tennessee is brutal. Western Oregon Exhibition, Nichols, Southern University, Utah Tech. All right, the Maui is okay. You get Cincinnati and then Ohio State or San Diego State. Then you get Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Montana State, Morgan State. Are the big games good enough to justify this non-conference schedule from an RPI perspective?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if their non-conference schedule was that much tougher last year. They had some big wins, but they played a lot of nobodies too. And they were still a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So I think there's less a margin for error in conference play when that happens. But I would like to see them schedule tougher teams, and they're going to in the future. They got the Duke home and home coming up.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see them get back maybe somewhere between Lute Olson and Sean Miller. Lute always put together a really tough non-conference schedule. Sean Miller, I think he's a guy who preferred to kind of start off slower. I was never crazy about that, but I think they'll get back there. But yeah, it's not as strong as I would like, but I think you're going to see it beefed up in the next couple of years.
I hope so. I hate it. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for tickets and driving down to go see Utah Tech. I didn't even know there was such a school. At least play. I know what you're trying to do, but winning over teams like that, other than getting your walk-ons in the game, there's only downside to it if the game is close or if you, God forbid, lose. I'm just not a fan. So
you're saying they scheduled a bunch of North Dakota States.
North Dakota State would have been preferable. Let me tell you that. Hey, before we get into picks, one last thing. There was a women's soccer goal that went viral for Arizona. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, Sammy Batosh, a freshman in Becca Moros's team, her second year. You've probably seen it. You heard me talking about it.
Yeah.
Ball bounces. I think it bounces off her legs. She falls to the ground. Just was it the 18 yards
sitting
or so
on her butt. Yeah.
Sitting on her butt, and she lifts her leg up and puts this floater right over the keeper. And it was not just a shot on goal, but it was one that was just like impossible for the keeper to save. It was amazing. It was their only goal of the match. They beat UC Davis 1-0. So, we haven't talked about the soccer team yet, but they're off to a pretty good start in Becca Moros's second year. They're 3-2-2, a lot of young talent, including Sammy, who she deserves all the recognition she's gotten for that. And it brings some positivity to the program on a national scale. So definitely some rebuilding going on after Tony Amato left for Florida. But in the meantime, they're getting some wins, some hard fought draws, and it's nice to see. And that goal was one of the best I've ever seen, men or women.
Yeah, it was spectacular. So keep it up, women's soccer. Way to go. When it comes to football picks, we have 12 games that we're going to pick this week. We'll go quickly. Both Shane and I went 5-6 against the spread last week. We are both under 500. I'm one game under 500. Yeah. He is 3 under 500. Right. Yep. Yeah, so we're one game apart.
I'll tell you what, you're the one who's got the column about picks. You better be more accurate.
Yeah. Sportsline.com. Check out my college picks. I got 15 of them for you this week. So check that out. Sportsline.com. And it is free. You don't need to pay for the Sportsline membership to see that. We are both 1-2 against the spread and straight up in Arizona picks. So Shane, we'll get right to it. We've got a 12-pack. We'll go through these quickly. Clemson is a 7.5-point favorite at Wake Forest in a game featuring ranked teams. Who you got?
I'll go with Clemson. I think they're back. I think last year was a bit of an aberration. I think Wake Forest will be lucky to hang with Clemson for more than 3 quarters.
I think Wake Forest is going to make this a game. I'm still not buying into Clemson. Okay. I'm probably crazy with this one. I think Clemson wins, but I'll say it's by a touchdown or less. This one's a weird one. I couldn't resist throwing it in there. 3-0 Duke at 3-0 Kansas. Shane, and Kansas, of all teams, is favored by 7.5. What a great job by Lance Leipold over at Kansas. I like them to cover. I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to blow the doors off Duke. Their offense has been phenomenal. They crushed Houston on the road last week, and they beat West Virginia on the road the week before in overtime. I'm going with Kansas big here. Who you got?
Oh boy, I'm going to go with Duke simply because I don't think it's fair for Kansas to have a men's basketball national champion and a football team that wins too. That's not fair at all. We haven't gotten either in a long time. So for a very petty reason, I'm going with Duke, and that's good enough for me.
I like where your head's at. Colorado might be the worst team in the country, and they're getting 21.5 at home against UCLA. Now, one caveat to this, Shane. I've heard, whether it's true or not, and I mentioned this to Canzano, that this could be Carl Durrell's last week. We'll see if it's true. He says probably at the end of the year with a buyout. We know Chip Kelly is safe. Does UCLA cover the 21.5 on the road?
It's hard for me. I'm struggling with this just because I still haven't made up my mind because UCLA didn't look very good either. Although I think this game might have been a wake-up call for them. 21.5 on the road. If it was USC, I take it in a heartbeat. I'm going to say Colorado finds a way to cover because UCLA just isn't playing very well right now.
UCLA won at the end of the game on a walk-off field goal against South Alabama.
South Alabama shot themselves in the foot. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, they should have lost, which would have been really embarrassing. Nobody's showing up to their games as is. I think Colorado's going to cover this one as well. Colorado's bad, but I think Carl Durrell is going to show some fight against his old team, maybe a 14 to 17 point game, go that way. Interesting game. Michigan State got blown out for the most part, lost by 11 to Washington last week. Now Minnesota is a 2.5 point favorite at Michigan State. I like Minnesota here. I think PJ Fleck's team is playing really, really well, and I'm just not big on the fighting Mel Tuckers. I'll take Minnesota to win the game outright and cover that 2.5. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm surprised PJ Fleck hasn't taken a bigger job yet. But yeah, I think Minnesota. Michigan State proved me wrong. I'm not going to do this fool me twice thing again. So yeah, Minnesota at home is it's an easy pick for me. I'll probably be wrong, but it's an easy pick.
A lot of my coworkers for my job work in Tennessee, and they are volunteer fans and alums. Tennessee is a 10.5 point favorite against Florida, who has won 6 in a row against the Vols. Who are you taking? Tennessee minus 10.5 or Florida getting the points?
I'll take Florida with the points. Florida, they're hard to figure out because they beat Utah the first week of the season, but I think that was more of like both teams getting their feet wet, and Utah is a long trip for them. And Florida struggled since then, barely got past South Florida, and then got whipped by Kentucky at home. But I'll take Florida to cover. I think it'll be a close game. If nothing else, Tennessee's going to have a little more nerves for this game. Like you said, lost to Florida 6 times in a row. They're going to hear about that in the press. So I'm going to go with Florida.
I am too. Florida has, Anthony Richardson's been turning the ball over lately, but remember he was a sneaky Heisman candidate after week 1. I think he's going to play pretty well. And I'm still not buying into Tennessee's defense. Close, fun game. Cool that College game day is going there. It's always been a great rivalry. But I think Florida covers. Tennessee wins. Florida makes this game close. A game that I'm going with the upset here, Shane. Oregon's a 6.5 point favorite at Washington State. I think the Cougars actually might be for real. I'm picking the upset. I know Oregon had a great win against BYU last week. I'm not buying it. I'm not only taking Washington State plus 6.5, I'm taking them outright. What do you think?
I'll disagree with you on both counts. I think Oregon covers, not by a lot, but I think they win somewhere in the 7 to 10 point range.
Taking another underdog outright, Shane, on the road. Maybe I'm just going crazy and trying to get you back into these picks, but I think Arkansas wins the game at Texas A&M as a 2.5 point underdog. I think they're just a better team. I think A&M just can't score enough. And I think in a lower scoring game, Arkansas will do enough and beat the Aggies once again. What do you think?
Arkansas almost lost to an FCS opponent themselves last weekend. I'll go with A&M on this one.
Ohio State is a 17.5 point favorite against Wisconsin. Buckeyes dropped 77 last week against Toledo. Wisconsin lost to Washington State a few weeks ago. Who you got?
Ohio State to cover. Wisconsin just isn't that good. The Big Ten overall does not have a lot of depth this year. I mean, we haven't even talked about Iowa and how bad they've been offensively. So yeah, but Ohio State is the big fish in the small pond. I'll go with them to cover.
The Big Ten is Ohio State, Michigan, next tier Penn State, and then everybody else. Even though Minnesota could be in that Penn State tier. They look really sharp. I'm going with the Buckeyes too. I think I don't think Wisconsin can generate enough offense. I know they put up a lot on poor Jerry Kill's New Mexico State team last week, but I don't think that Wisconsin is going to do enough to stay with Ohio State. I think Buckeyes win by 3 touchdowns. USC, this is a weird line, Shane. Oregon State has not lost a home game since 2020, and maybe even before that. I'd have to look that up. No, they were undefeated last year and undefeated thus far this year. They are a 6.5 point underdog at home to USC. This line is really fishy. I think USC wins by 2 touchdowns, though. Sometimes you just got to throw out odds makers. They know what they're doing in this one. I agree with you. I like Oregon State. I think they're actually better than most people think. I think they're a top 25 team, but I think USC is that much better. I think they cover. Okay. All right. We're going to go through these real quick, Shane. We'll just make a quick pick on these. Stanford at Washington. Washington favored by 13.5.
Washington easy. Stanford's terrible.
Huskies have a really good schedule. Only a game at Oregon on November 12th. They may go 11-1, if not 12-0, before facing USC or Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. I believe they avoid both of them during the regular season. And before we get to the Arizona game, Utah minus 14.5 at ASU.
I guess my better judgment, I'm going to go with ASU to cover. I think they're going to come out strong. I don't think they win, but I think you're going to see a better team this week.
Last year, Utah was down 21-7 at half, rolled off 28 in a row, and then ASU got blown out by Washington State. I expect Utah to win this game big. Sorry, Sean Aguano, it's not your day. Okay, finally, Shane, we'll do this one quickly as well. Arizona at Cal. Cal, we're going to say, is a 3-point favorite. What do you think?
For the first time, I'm going to take Arizona to cover. I think the first time, yeah, Arizona to cover and to win outright. I think they're the better team. Like Canzano basically stole my thunder. I think California's got a decent quarterback. Also, the guy with the last name of Plummer. I think Arizona's got
Will's brother.
Yep, got too much. I think Arizona's got too much firepower. I think they're better offensively than Notre Dame, which is kind of crazy to say. But I think it'd be a little ugly at first. But I think Arizona wins. I think somewhere in the 24-14 range.
All right, you're going to 10-point win. I actually like Arizona as well, Shane. I hope we're not jinxes here. I feel like this team has turned the corner. I think Arizona is due to win this game. I just think Justin Wilcox, we didn't even get to him with Canzano about his coaching future. This is Arizona's time with a game against Colorado coming up next. 4-1 start definitely looks promising. This is a game Arizona has to have. If they win this game, we're going to talk Bulls next week on Wildcat Country. I can promise you that. Arizona 24, Cal 21. So you have 24-14. I'm going 24-21. I want to thank John Canzano once again for joining Shane and I. Always glad to have him on. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Let's hope for another victorious weekend. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.